So I would like to ask Justin Haynes, Rams Sasagaran, Tabata Sensei, and Joyce Kwan to come up on the podium and explain what the surprise is.
Ali, we need to go back to slides. I don't know if this thing is running.
Good evening. I think yesterday it was mentioned that the world needs more Langer labs. So this is actually a map of where the current graduates of Bob are. And I think one thing that hasn't been mentioned is Bob's strong ties with Japan. And I think maybe like one of the charges for the next 30 years is Bob, I think you need to work on some of these areas here, filling them up. So I look forward to that. But actually, just to show you briefly, this book of letters is something that was a really major undertaking that really, Nicholas Pettis is the person who was behind this and really did a tremendous effort for this. And as you can see from all of these are just, I'm sure it's not a complete listing, but you saw already in the beginning that was the international. Here are all the different universities and companies. It's just staggering. Actually, we're still only in the ends here in Massachusetts, so you can see that it had a tremendous impact in all of our lives. And so it's just, and this isn't even the grandchildren, so this is only the first generation. Okay, so but before we give you the book of letters, if you can indulge us, I thought it would be nice to have a little quiz. Oh, so sorry. So you've already heard from Nicholas and also Mike that Bob was playing ping pong, but what I thought, if those of you who are paying attention, you saw from the video that there was quite a that actually looks pretty bad, Bob, that accident. You look okay now, though, so here's a quiz for you. So in which of the following sports did Bob consistently beat his fellow grad students during his graduate studies? So was it squash, ping pong, tennis, badminton, or racquetball? So, yes, so it was ping pong. Okay, so ping pong, what was actually funny were some quotes from, and these are in your book of letters, but one of them I'd like to read is from Colin Gardner. I guess you used to spend, we've already heard tonight, you spend many, many hours, 14 to 16-hour days in the lab, and the experiments often involved long-term incubation. So apparently this infamous basement of Building 12, there was a ping pong table, and Bob was an excellent player, probably the best in the department, and used to beat all of us. And Nicholas even said, I mean, this was great, because we were sending emails back and forth all of us, and we said, God, I had no idea Bob played ping pong. And Nicholas said, yes, this is actually how we met. In September 1971, he would meet in the Building 12, and every day at 4 o'clock, Bob was a champion, even beating the Chinese. Well, wait a minute, so I saw here, actually it doesn't say beating all the Chinese, so as a Chinese American, I guess I'm saying here, I guess I'm a pretty good ping pong player, so I'd like to, challenge you next time, Bob. I wanted to have a ping pong table here, but so if we can do that, that would be great. So, and actually, I'd like to set the record straight. Joachim said that the running started after the Hilltop Steakhouse, but actually, this is, we were doing a little bit of digging, Bob, on your childhood. So in high school, so how many people, here's another kind of quiz question. So did Bob break a record in the 100-yard dash in high school track? So here are the options. A is yes, B is no. Actually, C is yes and no. So you can guess, so the answer is actually yes and no. So this was actually very interesting. Appearances can be deceiving. So apparently, I don't know exactly the details. We'll have to ask Bob for this. But Bob indeed sets the record, but for the 96-yard dash. So apparently, this was really, really I guess a big kind of deal, because apparently the officials measured it wrong. So as we say, and so began his lifelong quest for breaking records. And and thinking big, and maybe this is where the doggy started. I don't know. People have, only Bob knows. So just the last couple questions. Just we've already heard that Bob has this great love for food, and again, Joachim says that the steaks. You know, again, I had no idea. You like steaks, but here again, here's another quiz. So Bob is rumored to have eaten this many steaks in one sitting. So 5, 6, 10, greater than 20, 0. He doesn't eat steaks. Well, I get it. So you know it's not 0 because of Joachim. So you blew mine anyway. But so what is it? Unbelievably, it's actually greater than 20. Is this true, Bob? What? Long time ago. Okay. So here this is again from Colin Gardner. So Colin, I have to thank you. You had great material in your letter. So it was a godsend to Bob when he found an ad for all-you-can-eat steaks for $2.95. So Bob ordered steaks by the half dozen, and he's rumored to have eaten over 20 of them. So he returned for a third time, only to find that the owner had established a limit of 5 servings per person. So actually, we all know now that Bob actually loves chocolate, and anyone who knows me, I love chocolate too. And actually, so one time in the lab, so you have to understand, we used to have, so I don't know either, we used to have parties with, cakes and ice creams and things. And so there was one, and I think Henry Brown showed the chocolate, right, with all the, the last drop and taking the last part. And so there was one piece of cake left. But you have to understand, this was a Denise Barrera cake. And anyone who remembers Denise's cakes were awesome. It was chocolate poppy seed. It was totally awesome. So I was about to take this last piece, and they're like, "No, Joyce, don't do it." Because why? Because Bob, you have to leave it for Bob. I said, "What do you mean? I haven't had it, And so let's just say that after I had the piece, that Bob comes in and says, "What happened to the last piece of cake?" Right? And so let's just say I don't do that anymore. And I have a box of Swiss chocolates, so Bob, can we say it's even? All right. So in all seriousness, I'd like to close by saying I think we've already heard so many times tonight that Bob has affected us tremendously, both professionally and personally. And I think Howard Bernstein said it best when he said, "My life would have turned out so differently had I not decided to work with you. I can't thank you enough for all the things which you taught me, the opportunities which you provided to me, the doors which you opened for me, and your eternal support." So I think with that, we really, really are very thankful, and I certainly am. And you've always been there for me, always. I mean, that is no joke about the 2 minutes. Like when I told you, I think I sent you an email saying I got tenure, and I knew, and the phone rang like 2 minutes later. My student was there. I said, "I knew it was Philip Lane," and it was you. It was totally awesome. So actually, before you come up for the book of letters, I would also like to take this opportunity. It's been heard many times tonight that Laura really is instrumental. And so I don't know if you know, Bob, there's a group of us called the Langer Lab Ladies. And so we actually understand, what it is that Laura, we would like to acknowledge and, or basically for everything you do to make Bob. So we actually would like both of you to come up now and accept the book of letters, and also, so please, Laura.
We'll ask Bob to accept and sit down because there are a few more things coming up. I'd like to thank all of you who sent letters, and if you have forgotten yours, we're still accepting them because the binding has been in the way that we can add more letters. We have 280 letters in this particular book, and I can tell you they are absolutely incredible. If you can stay later, you can see some of them. And now we have another major presentation. And that's what happens when I forget my papers, but I remember the names. We have another surprise for Bob. I'd like to ask Ellis Edelman, Justin Hayes again, Howie Rosen, and Larry Brown to come up. And I would like to say, although I know he's going to kill me, that Ellis Edelman is the mind behind what you're going to see, although others helped. He has been an incredible, I hope it works. You're going to run it from up here? Or? Okay. So I would like to ask all the colleagues to come up. This includes some of the very early graduate students, Bob. We had also Peter Ryan, who was this afternoon. Unfortunately, he had an accident, and so he cannot be this evening. Gentlemen, I'd like to present Larry.
Good evening. My name is Larry Brown, and I actually had the pleasure of being the first graduate student of Bob's who started his PhD and finished his doctorate in Bob's lab. And I must say that when I look at everyone here, this wonderful group, I have to think back to those early years when I first met Bob, and we're celebrating 30 years, and Bob, in fact, I think I can count 28 or 29 of those being associated with you. We didn't have a very large lab. In fact, we had a very small lab space. We were stuck into a small group of us at Dr. Folkman's lab at Children's Hospital, and Bob had a small amount of space here at MIT. But one thing that we all felt from the beginning, which obviously pervades us till now, that we're all part of one big family, an extended family. And when you think of family, you think of your spouse, your children, your parents. And there's one thing about Bob that reminds me of my late father, because only my father, Bob, ever had this attribute of all the people in my life that I had a long relationship with. And I think it's important because in this anything goes world, it's very difficult to find a person who we never hear say a curse or swear word. And that was true of my father. And when I think of Bob, I think back to all the times that things didn't go right, and there were certainly opportunities in today's world where people might let a forward, let a word slip, and Bob never did that. And for that, I respect Bob forever and ever, and thank him for all the support that he gave me throughout my career. Thank you, Bob.
I'm Howie Rosen, and I'm often referred to as the polyamide guy. And the Yoda story is true for those of you who've heard it. I was thinking, coming near the end of all the presentations and things, that it was going to be impossible to say something that someone else hadn't said. But I'm actually surprised there's a certain, I guess, descriptor that no one has used for Bob yet, and that is entrepreneur. And again, thanks to the internet, it's easy to find definitions of things. And the best definition I found is one who recognizes opportunities and organizes resources to take advantage of the opportunity. I think everything we've heard yesterday evening and earlier today and this evening really describes Bob is doing that. And then just two things I'll mention in terms of the resources. Larry just referred to it. Everyone talks about the Langer Lab. Back in the old days, in 1980, there was no Langer Lab. I think this is true about you. You had no lab space. I remember I worked in a teaching lab that had been abandoned because it was going to be renovated. And I scrounged around the lab for resources, which was the last word to do my experiments. And one of the things the reason Bob was excited about taking me into the group was that I was on scholarship, so he didn't have to pay for me. So I came with my own money. And then another thing people often say about entrepreneurs is it's putting people together and connecting them. So creating lots of points of contact. And we've heard a lot about the cross-functional or multidisciplinary research and the things that Bob does. And then just the last thing I'll mention, since I'm not quite sure what we're going to present, but it is about family. memorable times for me was going back to visit the lab once it really was a lab in the HST building. This was 5 or 6 years after I graduated, and I get in to talk to Bob, and he says, "Oh, let's go to the lab. I'll introduce you to some of the students." And it was a Friday. It was pretty late on a Friday afternoon, and we walk into the lab, and 2 of the students are having a somewhat heated discussion about assignments for the weekend. And the woman has one of the bound theses, under her arm. And the other one says, "Well, I would really want to look at that this weekend, but okay, well, you can look at it. You can take it home for the weekend. I'll look at it on Monday." And Bob comes in and introduces me, and they were basically fighting over the copy of my thesis to see who could take it home and read it that weekend. And I always accuse Bob of having orchestrated that just to make me feel good. He assures me it wasn't done. So I think it just reinforces how the generations and stories and everything is passed along. And so thank you very much for making me part of that, Bob.
So in 1 minute, not right now, but in 1 minute, we're going to show you the family tree. But I need to explain it because it's not a tree. And I know that everyone likes to make fun of you. The thing I made fun of was that every time Bob would be interviewed, he would be interviewed a lot. He would make the reporter's head spin by listing 25 students' names that were responsible for the work. Bob would never take credit. Now I'm up here. This was the cumulative work of many, many people. And though I'm up here, anybody could have been up here because the single universal credential that we all share, even though many of us have had many titles, many honors, many accolades, is the universal credential that's understood around the world. And that is that Bob Langer saw fit to let us into his lab for some point in time and let us into his life forever. So when we constructed this, it was constructed as a pyramid with you at the top, your mentors immediately below, your family above, and then successive layers of chronologies, or in a chronological order, of those people who I know mean so much to you. So if I can have the lights just a little dim, please. And if you could stop that, please, and start with the stand. I don't believe that anyone could have traveled to Germany on Tuesday and gone home, and go to Switzerland on Friday and gone home, and then we went to France on Sunday. Guys, you should just tell me when you're ready. So Bob got pulled aside, and they asked me what we were doing in France, and I said, well, Bob's the leader in drug delivery. And my English is actually pretty good. But my French is terrible. And I was getting Bob into bigger trouble. And finally, they pulled him behind the screen and they asked him to take his clothes off. And we were pretty late because if you travel with Bob, you don't get to the airport with plenty of time. So they asked me to get on a plane without Bob, and they explained to me that he was going to be detained overnight at Paris airport. And I asked if there was a fee that I could pay, which they said yes, there was. So I paid that fee, and Bob got on the plane. You guys ready? Because I've got a lot of stories, but no one wants to hear them. That's too good. know the names of everybody in this room because we had to enter those names by hand. It's quite impressive, a list of 495 people that make up that pyramid. Brendan Holt is a student in my lab who did the animation and worked with me, and I have left room at the bottom there, and I'm sure there will be many generations of people to come. So, congratulations to you, Bob.
Thank you, Brendan, and his fitness of Elazar and Elazar himself for this incredible piece of work. I'd like to ask all of you, we have a few more things for Bob, but first let's bring out the cake and let's all celebrate the birthday, special birthday of 30 years of research for Bob. So as the cake comes out, let's all sing happy birthday to Bob. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday. Happy birthday to you. We do have a few more surprises that are not in the schedule because we wanted them to be surprises for all of you. I think we need the lights now. And at this point, I would like to ask all the members of the program committee to come up. I'd like to have specifically here Mike Sefton, Elazar Edelman, Howard Bernstein, Edith Mathiewicz, Marsha Moses, Catherine Urey, Linda Griffith, Joachim Kohn, Amir Nashat, Mark Saltzman, Bob Linhart, Howie Rosen, David Mooney, David Putnam, Victor Young. Please come forward, all of us. We're going to do that fast. You know what's coming up. We don't have much time, but we're going to give some time to Bob. Some of this will involve you too. And so, the first thing I would like to do, this is not correct. Sorry, my schedule is being changed. So I would like to ask Mark Saltzman then and Bob Linhart to come forward. Who is going to make the honors? Yeah. It's not here. Yeah. Is Bob here? Bob has to come up on.
We have a letter from Wig Grossbeck, who's the managing partner and governor of the Boston Celtics.
Could we please have the slides over here?
Oh, do I need to do it again?
Yes.
1 second, Mark, wait.
Yeah, that's perfect. Perfect. You go ahead and read.
And the letter says, Dear Professor Langer, on behalf of the entire Celtics organization, and based on personally knowing you as well as a review of your illustrious career, I write to offer you our congratulations on being honored and celebrated for your 30 years of monumental contributions to education, science, and society. Your unparalleled insights and tireless efforts have certainly made this world a better place. It is an honor for us to congratulate you today. Very truly yours, Wig Grossbeck. There is something to remember in that.
So Mike and Sam, you come closer. This is for you guys.
Thank you. That's great. Thank you so much. Thank you.
I would like to ask now Howie Rosen and David. 1 minute, please. And David Mooney. As long as we find it. That's that. Okay. Go. Light slides back. Yeah. Thank you.
Here we go. Dear Professor Lang, or Bob, as we call you, it is a great pleasure that on the occasion of the celebration in your honor, I can join your many colleagues and peers in attendance and your many other friends and admirers from around the world in congratulating you for 30 years of remarkable achievements as a scientist, an educator, and a citizen. I stand in awe of the fact that while juggling several faculty appointments, issuing hundreds of patents, mentoring a legion of scientists, and making significant contributions to both the scientific community and the economy, you find the time to remain a dedicated New England Patriots fan and season ticket holder. In my opinion, this makes you one of the most devoted Patriots fans, and I would venture to guess that you are also among the most accomplished. For these reasons, it is my privilege to name you an honorary New England Patriot. As you know, each member of the Patriots receives a game jersey, and you have been assigned the number 30 in recognition of your 30 years of contribution to the scientific, academic, and civic communities. Also, please accept my heartfelt congratulations and gratitude on this special evening. Sincerely, Robert K. Kraft, Chairman and CEO of the New England Patriots, and he wrote in here at the bottom, as you can see, hope we bring you another championship.
New York State. Quite testimony to my respects. So from the Boston Red Sox, this certificate acknowledges Professor Robert Langer and is a distinguished member of the Red Sox Nation. The Red Sox acknowledge Professor Langer's outstanding service to science and education fields in Massachusetts for the past 30 years. The Red Sox are proud to play a part of 3 days symposium in Professor Langer's honor. We commend his many roles on the MIT, Harvard, and Children's Hospital faculties. Council published contributions to the scientific journals and research studies, work with the FDA, and numerous awards in the pharmaceutical and biotechnology fields. We gratefully salute his loyalty and to his support to his Boston Red Sox. Okay, I'm finished. I'd like to ask Alex Edelman to come up if he is in the audience.
Right here.
Very good, because he has something more to announce. Alex was very much responsible for getting this from the Red Sox.
My name is Alex Edelman, and I was our son, and I work in the public relations department at the Boston Red Sox. And as the son of one of your students, Bob, I know that how much your students adore you and how much you love them in return. And on Thursday night at Red Sox offices, we were trying to find a fitting honor to celebrate 30 years in science. And we had invited you to throw out the ceremony of first pitch on Friday, which is the highest honor that the Red Sox will sell, and to accept a jersey bearing your name at the same time, which is something that is not usually done even with the ceremony of first pitch. And, oh yes, I might add that that's more impressive than any other that Boston sports team saw fit to play. And initially, we were shocked when you told us that you would not be able to attend Friday night's game or throw out the first pitch because you wanted to spend more time with your students for the symposium in your honor. And when I heard that, I understood why your students feel so much admiration for you. And so on behalf of Mr. Lucchino, the President and CEO of the Boston Red Sox, I'd like to read a letter. On behalf of the entire Red Sox organization. Dear Professor Langer, on behalf of the entire Red Sox organization, I'd like to commend you on your assuring contributions to the academic and scientific communities over the past 30 years. This symposium in your honor is a well-deserved celebration for your decades of service in the field and your stature as one of the world's most preeminent scientists in the field of biotechnology. Your countless awards, contributions to medical journals, work with the FDA, business success, and especially your remarkable influence among your students and peers deserve both recognition and respect. You have been a terrific ambassador to the scientific and educational communities of Massachusetts. We are happy to be one of the many institutions honored this week. We are especially proud to have you as an avid fan of the Red Sox and one of the most distinguished members of the Red Sox Nation. As a memento for the Red Sox, we have enclosed an official certificate acknowledging your outstanding service and support. Sincerely, Larry Lucchino, President and CEO of the Boston Red Sox.
Thank you, Alex. And now I would like to ask Howard Bernstein and Edith Mathowicz for one more presentation.
Must be for hockey.
No, soccer.
Ping pong.
This is actually a message from the Honorable Senator from
Can't hear you.
Massachusetts. I have words from Senator John
Use the
Kerry,
microphone.
who would have liked to have been here but was unable to. And in place, he's entered your contributions to the congressional record. And he has a summary of what Senator Kerry entered to the Congress. And I will just read the beginning and the end given the time constraints. Mr. President, I rise today to recognize and celebrate the work of a great man whose work has an impact on lives throughout this country and all over the globe. This month, hundreds of scientists will gather at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology to celebrate one of their own, Dr. Robert Langer, and I'm proud to join them in doing so. He then goes on to summarize Bob's contributions, and I'll just read the conclusion. It says, Mr. President, Massachusetts has a long and rich history of technological innovation, global leadership in healthcare, and advancing insight into the human condition. Dr. Langer's genius and creativity have kept the faith with that history through 30 years of providing cutting-edge solutions to the medical problems of today and tomorrow. Along with his colleagues, family, and friends, I thank him for his contributions and look forward to many more years of his work on behalf of people all over the world.
Now I would like to ask Marsha Moses to come for another presentation.
Bob, it appears as if Nicholas has much more confidence in my ability to speak extemporaneously than I do, because he just whispered to me that the letter congratulating you from Senator Edward Kennedy has yet to arrive, and I should read it. So, on behalf of Senator Edward Kennedy, I congratulate you on 30 amazing years of science. Thanks for all of your work.
Now I would like to ask Catherine Urich and Linda Griffith to come for another presentation. It's so many publications.
So we have a proclamation from the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, from the Governor's Office of Mitt Romney and the Lieutenant Governor Kerry Healy, claiming Professor Robert Langer in recognition for your 30 years of outstanding contributions to science and education. Your dedicated service to the community of scholars, education, of students, and innovation is deserving of acknowledgement by all the citizens of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. 13th of July, 2006.
Before we go to the next presentation, Bob, after your speech, you're not leaving, we need to take pictures. Okay, we have one last presentation. I would like to ask Joachim Kohn and Amir Nashat for this presentation.
Bob, I don't know how they put it on, but I have the honor of presenting to you a letter from the President of the United States. Dear Robert, congratulations to you as an efficient leader. Congratulations as you are honored by your colleagues for your remarkable achievements. Throughout your career, you have advanced human knowledge in medicine and science, have conquered deadly diseases, and prepared a rising generation of scientists for the challenges and possibilities ahead. Your groundbreaking achievements have brought hope and comfort to countless individuals and are helping to build a better future for our children and our grandchildren. This celebration is a fitting tribute to your hard work and ingenuity, and I appreciate your many contributions to the well-being of our citizens and the progress of our nation. Laura and I, this is Laura, the President. Laura and I send our best wishes on your very special occasion. Sincerely, George W. Bush.
Ladies and gentlemen, before we hear Bob speaking, and hopefully he will have a few nice words, I'd like to ask all of you to raise your glass for a toast for the incredible contributions of our good friend Robert Langer, and for the health of his family, Laura, Michael, and Susan, and Sam, and of all the Langer family. Cheers. Ladies and gentlemen, may I present now Robert Langer.
Thank you so much. I don't think I've ever experienced anything quite like the last day and a half, and particularly tonight. And I really don't have the words to say thank you, nor will I be able to thank all the people that have been kind enough to come and kind enough to write. I guess I thought I'd try to first say thank you to the organizing committee, who asked my mom and aunt, my sister, her husband, and my wife's family to come tonight. But mostly, I guess I thought I would try to thank people, and really two sets of people. First, I wanted to thank the organizing committee and the people who made this happen, which Joachim, Melissa and her team, Howard Bernstein, Howie Rosen, Edith Mathias, Mark Saltzman, Victor Yang, Linda Griffith, Justin Haynes, Bob Linhart, Dave Mooney, Marcia Moses, Samir Nishan, Dave Putnam, Catherine Europe, Rashad Shastri, who had to leave early, and Elizar. I guess I should thank Alex Edelman as well. I guess we heard a lot about how I got to where I was. I guess I thought I'd give you my version in terms of thanking people. I guess the first person I have to thank is my mom, who's here tonight, and my dad. Not just for giving me birth, but really for the terrific example that she set for me and my dad set for me. But let me move many years later. A lot of people, I think, when they have a good career, I think maybe they're kind of born to it, and you sort of know that they're going to do well. I've never felt like I had a clear path, as I'll talk about more, and actually even as Alex Steve mentioned a little bit. I certainly had my ups and downs, and I've had plenty of downs, but I had a lot of good luck. And so I started actually at MIT as a graduate student. I was very lucky my first year there. I had some very good classes, and in fact I was very inspired by Ed Merrill's classes in polymers. In fact, a couple of things I didn't realize until tonight. First, I never knew that I got the best grade in the class. I knew I had an A, but they never told you, how well you did. So that was actually good. And I was actually shocked that Ed paid enough attention to me to realize that I was playing with my hair all the time. So that was kind of interesting. I was really lucky. It's interesting. Today, a lot of people do bioengineering. Then almost nobody did. And I was very lucky that Clark Coleman took me into his laboratory. And that's where I first really learned about, the intersection of biology and engineering. And one of the great things about Clark is that he was incredibly thorough. Every time he did something, he, wanted to go deeper and deeper, and I learned a tremendous amount. The other good thing about being in Clark's laboratory was some of the people I met, like Bruce Hamilton, and in particular Colin Gardner. I remember when I came to that lab, I didn't know how to use a pipette. Actually, I still don't know how to use a pipette. And Colin would spend hours trying to teach me how to use pipettes and how to work in the laboratory. And Colin's actually had a remarkably successful career, but teaching me how to work in the lab, that was probably one of his, not big successes. But he really was incredibly patient, and I tremendously value what he did. And I remember back to those days, my very first, I was thinking it's interesting to look back at your publications. There's 880 publications. Publication 1 actually was with Clark, with Colin Gardner, with Bruce Hamilton, and actually with George Whiteside, who's here. That was my very first paper, and all those people have, it's amazing to watch how well they've done, and I just feel fortunate fortunate to have been associated with them. Also, when I was a graduate student at MIT, as was mentioned, I met different people playing ping pong, and one of them was Mike Septon, who's just been an incredible friend, and the other is Nick, and I just can't say enough about, it's amazing when Nick is your friend. I mean, he does so many things for you, and both the effort he puts into an event like this, but really all he's done for me in my life in so many ways. There's been times when, and I'll mention this more, when sort of the outside community doesn't believe in you, and you sort of need people to believe in you. And I always feel very lucky that Nick was such a good friend and helped me. And of course, it's been mentioned many times, when I got done with my degree from MIT, I really didn't have a very clear idea what to do. And I mostly got jobs from oil companies. That's what chemical engineers did then. But I didn't really want to do that. And so I started to apply to schools to teach actually education. I was very interested in teaching chemistry education, but actually no school would hire me to do that. And then I had this idea about maybe, I got some faculty positions, but I didn't think that I was ready for them. And so then I thought about applying to hospitals. And most of them didn't answer me back. And there was a postdoc in Clark's lab named Barry Bunell. And he suggested, well, maybe I should write to Dr. Folkman. He said sometimes he's heard that he takes unusual people. I'm not sure that he meant that as a compliment. But fortunately, Dr. Folkman did hire me, and that job changed my life. It was very unusual for a chemical engineer. At that time, I don't think, in fact, it ever happened before, to work in a surgery lab. And there were really three things about that job that were really fundamentally changed everything that would affect me from now on. One, and probably most importantly, was Dr. Folkman himself. As certainly Marcia mentioned when she was introducing Dr. Folkman today, some of the speeches that I made, and this is true, it's like his outlook. I mean, if people feel that I've been a good role model for my students, I learned it from him. He thinks, all kinds of ideas and believes that anything's possible. And seeing that was just a wonderful example for me. Secondly, it exposed me to all kinds of things in medicine, firsthand, surgery and so forth, and it gave me a lot of ideas. And the third thing that was just really terrific was the people I met there, people that I continue to maintain great friendships with today still. People like Bruce Setter, Dave Kessler, who you heard last night, Julie Milwaukee, Mike Claxburn. These were all people in the early 70s that I would meet. And in particular, Jay LeConte, who's not able to be here, but who I've spent many, many years working with on tissue engineering, and Henry Graham. And Henry has just been such an incredibly close friend and collaborator, and I just feel so grateful that I've been able to share so many things with him, and he's just been such a tremendous friend and collaborator. And after I left Children's Hospital, it was interesting. I wanted to get an academic position, but I applied to different chemical engineering departments. And most of the ones that I applied to actually interviewed me. They thought, again, I was this sort of unusual person. I published papers in Science and Nature. But every place that I interviewed in a chemical engineering department, Berkeley, Caltech, Minnesota, they all turned me down. Basically, they said in 1977, when I applied, that what I was proposing to do, which was controlled release and biomaterials, they said, well, that's not engineering. They said there's no equations in that. Where's the mathematical modeling and angiogenesis? And so everyone turned me down. So I was very fortunate. The story that Alex Goodenough told you about the bathroom in Beijing. So I was very lucky that Dr. Folkman and Neville Scrimshaw met there. So that I actually did get this job. But the year after that, Neville Scrimshaw left the department. the people who were left behind, they weren't very supportive of me. And in fact, that's kind of an understatement. In fact, I still remember within a year after he left, two of the most senior, most famous people in the department totally separately came up to me. They said they were actually trying to be helpful, but both of them independently said to me that, you know, you're an assistant professor now, and we want to give you some advice. You know, you have 3-year appointments at MIT where your appointment can get renewed. And basically, I think up until then, I always thought that was automatic. You know, it wasn't promotion, it wasn't tenure, you know, it's just getting a renewed appointment. And they said, you know, you should forget it. You're not going to get your appointment renewed, much less get promoted, much less get tenure. So they said, their advice to me is to leave. That was pretty discouraging. And then, actually, it's interesting, there was a very famous chemical engineer who was head of the chemical engineering department. And I remember talking to him, and he said, well, Bob, you know, it's kind of interesting. You know, different chemical engineers have taken different career paths. One guy, you know, was doing like postal work. Then there's a guy who's now a chemical engineer who's the head of Reader's Digest. And he said that you know, it's interesting, you're doing something kind of related. You know, you worked in Dr. Fulton's surgery lab, and now you're in the nutrition department. He said, everybody, you know, so there are some chemical engineers who do some unusual things. Like, you know, I sort of felt now I was in the same camp as Reader's Digest. So I wasn't getting a lot of encouragement. I was also getting all my grants turned down, and you know, and of course, what you hope for as a young professor is that you would have mentors. You have department heads or senior people in the faculty who really were giving you advice, nominating you for awards, helping you. And I didn't have really any of that in my department. I was incredibly lucky that I had one very close friend who would give me good advice then, and has continued to give me good advice my entire career. And I'll always be incredibly grateful to Alex Liebenow for doing that. You know, he was sort of the one person at MIT in that department that really helped me, and has continued to help me, and I'll always feel tremendously grateful for that. Not just on those speeches, which were very true what he said. It's amazing. I think 10 people in a row gave speeches in the nutrition department and didn't get tenure. So it was, you know, it was pretty discouraging. I was lucky. I mean, I basically have always been very stubborn, so I just kept at and doing stuff, and eventually the things that I did, fortunately, you know, would make some impact. So finally they did give me that 3-year appointment, and eventually did promote me. Another thing that I did that was sort of considered a bit unusual and maybe a bit strange at MIT was that was this whole idea of patents and intellectual property. And you know, what would happen is I have these ideas, and the problem is that I was really the only one that believed in them. And so the question is, if you're the only one that believes in them, you know, I was writing these papers, and the papers were doing okay, but the thing is that they were just papers. They weren't changing anybody's life. They weren't leading to any products. They weren't doing anything more than papers. So I really started working on the idea of intellectual property. I was very lucky. I met, in my opinion, the best patent attorney in the country, Patricia Pass, and she would write these great patents. But to have patents by themselves isn't enough. And one of the things that anybody that's ever been involved in trying to start companies realizes is that, you know, you can't do it by yourself. You really have to have people to work with. You have to have good partners. And basically the major way, if you want to have the kind of money that it takes to create companies, is you have to really do that by and large through venture capital. Very difficult to raise the kind of funds that you need to. You get the kind of help that you need to without that. And most people, if you work with venture capitalists, it's not always an easy experience. I was, again, incredibly lucky. I met Terry McGuire, and we've just had a wonderful relationship. In fact, I'll just give you one of the things that's interesting. Terry was once interviewed by Harvard Biotechnology Club, and actually, I think this is, for those of you that work with venture capitalists, this will make sense. He said, well, when they asked him about venture capital, he said, well, they said, how do most places work? And how it's really been the fact that it's not that he doesn't want to make money, actually he's made quite a bit of money, but I think that he places personal integrity and relationships with people above that. And because of that, I've gone back to him time and again, and we've just had a wonderful relationship, and I can't thank him enough for that. In the course of doing these companies, I've also had the privilege to work with just some outstanding CEOs of many different companies, people like Alan Crane, people like Mark Levin, Rodney Perlman, Gary Cleary, Jim McNabb, and many others, and I feel incredibly fortunate to have worked with them. And I've also had the great fortune of having a great staff, initially in Roca, then Pam Brown, who led our lab for many, many years, who's here tonight, and so many of you remember. And today, I feel incredibly lucky to have Connie Beal and Hilda Thompson and Nancy Parkinson, who, as my wife explained quite clearly, run my academic life. And on that note, I can't thank Laura enough. I mean, people have mentioned Laura many times, but I don't even have I was going to actually tell Edith Mathias the story where she has that graph where my life changed once I married Laura, and that's certainly absolutely right. She's enabled me to have an incredibly productive life, and I just, you know, I don't have the words to express just how much I love her and how much she means to me, and I'm just so pleased to be able to share this with her, and to be able to share tonight with my two boys, Michael and Sam. And finally, I guess maybe I'll end this with a story, but really to me to share these 2.5 days with you, my mentors, my students, my postdocs, my collaborators, and my friends. And actually, I really do want to mention people that I've been so lucky again on the outside, my friends like Sunwon Kim, Alan Hoffman, George Heller, and actually Joe Robinson, who's not here tonight because he's been ill, but who really just given me tremendous just tremendous help and advice in my life, and I feel very grateful for all they've done for me as well. But just to go back to the students, and like I said, I've been really lucky to have had just an incredible group of people working with me, and I can't thank all of you, and I can't probably tell that many stories, so I'll just tell one about how hard everybody in the lab works. And Ron Siegel talked earlier today, and you may know that he worked on, as he talked about, ethylene vinyl acetate copolymer, which we in the lab would abbreviate EVA. So Ron worked on this for a number of years, and Ron also had a personal life. Ron got married, and Ron had a baby, which he named Eva. And one day, Cam Leon, who was another postdoc in the lab, came to see me, and he said, Bob, it's amazing how serious people take their work, that Ron named his baby after this polymer. And again, that is a true story, but I've been incredibly lucky to have had such a tremendous group of people to work with, to teach me, and to have as friends and colleagues and mentors. And I just want to thank you all. It's been a long night, but I'm incredibly appreciative. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you for coming. Good night.
Thank you. Oh, of course I will.
Thank you.